Hey, good morning. Welcome to Cascade Natural Gas's Conservation Advisor Group meeting. This is the Q3 meeting being held on July 15th of 2026. My name is Caleb Reimer. I manage Cascade's natural gas program in Washington. Today we'll have call it a fairly consistent agenda. We'll start with our safety moment. We'll go through program updates, including the commercial industrial program, our residential program, as well as our low-income weatherization program. We've got a few regulatory timeline updates, and then I would say one of the bulk pieces of our conversation today would be our update on our 2027 CPA, Conservation Potential Assessment, the plans, conversations, input, suggestions. I think that'll be a really good piece of the conversation. As always, those on the call, I encourage you to turn your camera on and mic on if you choose to have any questions, comments, anything like that. And I also encourage you to start by mentioning your name as well as the association or company that you're with. I'll get started here with the safety moment. This morning, we'll talk about heart health and heart safety. You can read the screen here some ideas about the importance of heart health and reducing or changing factors that contribute to higher risks of heart disease, heart failure, stroke, all those related unfortunate issues that pop up. Some suggestions on the screen involving heart health are knowing family history, focusing on a healthy diet, getting exercise such as walk, which I think is a great idea throughout the day, monitoring your blood pressure, knowing some of your call it your health numbers like cholesterol, and also just being mindful about breathing and reducing your stress levels where it's appropriate. I also think, especially as I'm sitting here with the 100-degree heat coming around today, making sure to stay hydrated, drink water, and especially if you're going to be outside, focus up on your nutrition and getting sleep and all the good rest that goes in with it. Heart health is very important. Next, we've got a review of our Q2 action items from back in April. We had 2 of them, both of which have been concluded. The first one was CNGC was requested to share examples of social media outreach, in particular in the commercial industrial side, with WUTC staff. Those were shared involving some items on, I believe, LinkedIn and a couple other media channels, so some great resources there. And then secondarily, this was also completed. WUTC staff followed up with CNGC in regards to the plans for the 2027 CPA, Conservation Potential Assessment, with our contracting plans to renew with ICF, previously AEG. We are planning on continuing that process with ICF. We actually have Ken Walter on the call today where we can talk more about the plan, gather input from this group, and help us tailor and focus that Conservation Potential Assessment to be as strong and prolific as possible. That work will be concluding here, or I should say concluding next spring, but starting up here very shortly once our contracting phase completes. As normal, we've got a portfolio update covering the first half of 2026. I see Brian popped on the camera here. I'll turn it over to you, sir, and we can discuss a great solid progress and solid update to our C&I program through the first quarter of the biennium and first half of the year.
Perfect. Thank you, Caleb. Again, my name is Brian Farnsworth. I work with TRC Companies, and we are the implementation contractor for Cascade Natural Gas Commercial and Industrial Program. So today we're going to be providing our update through Q2, through the beginning of July, or the end of June rather. As a reminder, as always, these updates have not gone through our rigorous end-of-year verification, so these are considered estimates at this time. But as of the end of Q2, we have achieved 250,000 therms. We paid approximately $645,000 in incentives to commercial and industrial customers. And this represents 32 natural gas savings measures. And then I've provided our largest incentive that we paid and largest therm savings project through Q2 was through Esprit Decor, and I believe this was a roof insulation project, if I'm not mistaken. Next slide, please. Oh, and I did want to mention, if you have a question, feel free to interrupt me, or you could ask the question at the end of my portion, but I'm okay with either of those. So this chart here shows our therm savings through the end of Q2, and it also provides a comparison to 2025. So you can see similar performance in 2025 and 2026. We did 68,000 therms in Q2 of 2025, and then 60,000 therms in Q2 of 2026. Let's see. So then in terms of the totals, though, we had done 82,000 therms as of year to date this time last year, and then year to date this year we were at 250,000 therms. You can see that the goal was quite different, though. We were looking at a goal of 443,000 therms for 2025 and 258,000 therms for 2026. And then in terms of the percentage to goal there, respectively, 19% for 2025 and 97% for 2026. Next slide, please. Essentially, this chart shows our trend line to goal. You can see that the top line there with the dark green tracking the dotted line is our progress to goal for 2026. You can see that we are, while our goal is 258,000 therms, you can see that we're on track and with our pipeline projects to achieve somewhere just under 400,000 therms for the year. And then you can see there that the light blue line was our 2025 target, and the gray line was our progress to that target line for 2025. And then in terms of the biennial therms forecast and the biennial goal, you can see that our therms achieved is the 250,421. And then over the 2-year span, that's going to be looking at 309,000 therms that we've still yet to achieve. Now, if we look at the chart by measure, you can see that custom is overwhelmingly leading, and among custom other. Now, I believe that large number there is due to greenhouse heat curtains, which has been something new that we've seen in the last 2 years, year and a half. But it's something that greenhouses are adopting. It's actually, from my understanding, something that was sort of thought up in California, and some firms from California have entered Washington State and are starting to bid these projects. And I believe we've seen at least 3 now, maybe 2 that have been processed, and then we have 1 that is just about to go through again. I think Suspended Brands is the next one that we're going to be seeing, and I think that's 20 to 25,000 therms that should be closing in the next month. So we're going to be adding to that, but we're excited to see that. Otherwise, it looks like some typical measures that are high performers are water heaters, boilers, heat recovery, and then laundry is another interesting one that has been kind of interesting to see. So we have been doing, our business development team has been doing a lot of outreach to laundromats. So we're hoping to see additional laundry measures also.
Yeah, and if I recall, Brian, we increased the laundry incentive as of March 16th and later pretty significantly. So hopefully that's helping us drive a few more projects otherwise would not have been completed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here's what I do for this section of the report is I essentially look back through the monthly reports for the 3 months that represent the quarter, and I pull some of our activities that our marketing team has been engaged in. So, of course, print and digital ads for a number of different outlets. We introduced the idea of the billboard ad, and that's something that we're excited about. I'm not sure that we can track how much participation that's driving, but I think that we've done billboard ads both in the Bremerton area and the Kitsap Peninsula area. Then e-blasts, of course. So we do e-blasts to both customers and contractors. And then given that we increased our incentives, we hosted a webinar. So in terms of the participants, I believe we had energy service companies, ESCOs, contractors, and customers, commercial industrial customers that attended that. Just to let them know that the incentives have gone up, and we just did a kind of a measure by measure analysis of showing what the incentive was and what it went up to. In May, we attended the WASBO conference in Tacoma. We hosted a contractor breakfast in Kitsap Peninsula. So Zone 2, which is the Kitsap Peninsula area, has traditionally been or historically been an underserved community. And so we've tried to allocate additional marketing resources to that area to try to drum up additional participation. And to give some perspective there, I think we had 1 project that was in that zone in all of last year. So we're hoping to change that this year and really put some marketing effort there to try to increase projects from that particular region. And then in terms of the greenhouse heat curtain projects that I mentioned, we have done a case study, which is essentially where we take a project, we interview the customer, we take some photographs, we do an on-site visit, we interview them, and we wrap that up into sort of a one-page PDF that we can highlight just to show other customers that those types of projects are out there, and then just the kind of therm savings they could be looking to. So Free Rain Farms was the name of that one. And then I mentioned that Suspended Brands is the second one. So those will be our two greenhouse heat curtain projects for 2026 if we don't get any additional projects. But I believe that case study is done. I'm not sure if it's on the website yet. I can look into that, but we're happy to see that case study wrapped up. And then it looks like another e-blast for custom incentives. So that's another area where we're trying to drive production. I know that custom was leading the measure performance chart there, but we're always trying to make sure that customers are aware of the fact that we offer custom incentives because our prescriptive or our standard incentives are more front and center. They're featured on our brochure, but we want customers to know that if they have any process specific upgrades, anything that makes natural gas use more efficient, or save natural gas, that we would love to look at those projects. And those are on a pre-approval only basis. So we're really trying to spread awareness for our custom projects. Next slide, please. And then kind of similar to the last slide here, this is where we've just taken some graphics out of our marketing and outreach efforts. So one thing we have been doing is educating about clean buildings. So clean buildings compliance, benchmarking, we want to make sure that Cascade Natural Gas commercial and industrial customers are aware of the upcoming changes and that they're ready to comply. And if they need additional resources, information, they can reach out to us. You can see on the top right is a graphic for our webinar where we discuss the increased incentives. Bottom left is the flyer for our Zone 2, which is Kitsap Peninsula Contractor Breakfast, where we serve a great breakfast. We have a space where we host contractors. And then for that, we actually gave away a pair of Mariners tickets, I believe was for a game in August with the Cubs. So those have been given away. That event's been completed. And then bottom right, you can see our walkthrough. So that's something that we try to offer for customers is we'll do a business development walkthrough where we have customers that say, hey, we'd love to save natural gas. We're not sure how we can do that. And then we have staff that will go out and visit a site and do a walkthrough for customers to try to identify natural gas savings and efficiency opportunities for them. Last slide. I don't believe this has changed for last month. These are sort of our longer term pipeline projects that we monitor throughout the year. I think I added this up earlier this morning. I want to say it's around 110, 120,000 therms. You can see we have a project through the YMCA. We have retro commissioning projects across 4 schools for Longview School District. We did have some refrigerated case store projects for Safeway and Hagen grocery stores last year, and we have 3 remaining for this year that we've been monitoring the progress of that we'll be incentivizing. And then the last one on that list there is Suspended Brands, which is the greenhouse heat curtain project I mentioned that should be closing out probably in the next week or so, if not at the latest in August sometime. So that is an overview of all of our pipeline and forecasted projects for the year.
Excellent. I think that concludes the C&I updates. We'll leave a bit of space for anyone if there's any questions or conversations you'd like to have here. In summary, looking at a fantastic 2026 with a near certainty of exceeding our therm saving goal and a strong likelihood of meeting or exceeding our biennial goal by the end of next year, which is just fantastic. Compliments the TRC team led by Brian. Yeah, Wesley.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and it sounds like good news. So kudos to Cascade for being successful so early in the year. I have 2 questions. One of them is, from this last biennium, I think one of the problems Cascade faced was some of these larger customers postponing projects, not outright canceling them, but postponing them. Have you seen any of those projects popping up so far in the year?
I don't believe so. We have tracked that, and our technical manager Bob Cootie does maintain that list. I don't know that any of those that have fallen off have come back online, but it is something that we're monitoring.
Okay. Yeah, I
Obviously,
think that.
Whidbey
Mhm.
Island Naval Air Station was the largest one, and we have not heard any news that that one's coming back.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect so, given their reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's an interesting thing given, um, you know, I wouldn't say reliance, but given how many like larger projects Cascade sees and the delays being, it seems like a recurring thing. It'd be interesting to know if the delays come to fruition as finishing later on. So we can keep track of that, I guess. And the other one uh, about heat curtains, greenhouse heat curtains. That's a newer measure, so that's exciting to see. I'm wondering if Cascade, or I'm wondering what the evaluation looks like for those measures. Um, I don't think Cascade has evaluated them in the past, but I'm I'm curious, like I guess what EM&V you rely on for that, and if there's plans to evaluate it, um, and when those plans are.
Yeah, I can provide some thoughts there, Wesley. And Brian, if you've got any other, feel free to chime in. That's actually one of the topics we have near the end of this presentation with Jody leading it. That'll be one of our plans is to renew or restart our 4-year EM&V cycle from starting for 2027. And we do plan on reviewing our commercial industrial measures that were installed over the past 4 years as a part of that. So with our current outline, which of course is a conversation later today, we'd like to have EM&V completed and filed for things like heat curtains and all of our other past 4-year commercial industrial measures, call it by the end of next year, or maybe even this time next year, depending on when we kick that off. Of course, pending the conversation later today. And that would be through billing analysis, most certainly.
Yeah, sounds good. Appreciate it.
Great question. Especially with some of these custom measures. Like Brian mentioned, we've got a really strong technical team at TRC led by Bob Cootie doing the calculations, figuring out incremental costs, install costs, how many therms we expect to save based off of usage rates, sometimes occupancies, hours of operation, all these pieces here. So it's a robust process, but of course, billing analysis, calculations for EMV, it's the gold standard for us here, which we completed that just under 4 years ago now for the commercial industrial program for, I believe, the first time for Cascade. Then we followed that up with 2 years of residential review, first with equipment, secondarily with our weatherization measures. And we are just now completing actually a conversation yesterday about our low income weatherization program. So great process that we're working through. Any other questions or topics for Brian here? All right, thank you, Brian.
All right, thank you very much.
We'll move on to a bit briefer update on the residential program. We'll have Jesse pop on the mic here.
Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate it. So I am Jesse Legault. I'm a energy efficiency analyst for Cascade Natural Gas. The current slide that we're looking at is a recap of the year to date, so January 1st through June 30th for the residential program. And it was another strong performing quarter for the residential program. So you can see a comparison of 2026 versus 2025 for therms and total incentive dollars awarded. And so far through 2026, we have achieved 583,979 therms. So versus an annual plan goal of 194,000, we're already 300% to goal. And compared to this time last year, we've actually seen a year-over-year increase of 25% of therms saved. We've seen 11% year-over-year increase in total measures. So this year we've issued 6,036 measures. And for dollar amount, it is 29% over year. So that was just over $9.1 million in incentives issued. So please feel free to review this while we are taking a moment. And again, reminder, these are unofficial, so this has not been reconciled. These are our estimates. But yeah, strong performance, and just kudos to the processing team. The volume is maintaining and crushing it. Pretty awesome.
One thing to note on this slide that Jesse mentioned is called the dollars and the therms going out the door are both records for us. And even though we only compared to the 1 year pass of 2025, 2025 was also a record year. So it's a fantastic thing to see. I'm seeing some people on the call right now who I could say thank you for focusing on that. And we've talked about this pretty much every quarter of our point of sale program, providing upfront rebates to select trade allies, right around close to 3 dozen or so at this point, actually, which Stephanie Reed leads. And of course, we also have some others on our program delivery team, like I see Joseph on the call right now. One of our enhancements over the past few months that we've done is having our program delivery team call it being one-on-one specialists with a subset of those point of sale contractors. Knowing call it our administrators' names, who to contact, if an issue pops up, there's a direct source. We're just making that program incrementally better each month. So just thanks to those on the call that are making that happen. And I'm sure there's others on the call here I can't see on my front screen here, so I apologize if I miss any names. All right, next slide.
Yeah, and what we have here is a recap of therms saved according to measure. And really the standout here is just the attic insulation measure continues to be the rock star, where it alone has almost saved 300,000 therms this year. And then in descending order, prescriptive air sealing and furnace kind of round out the top 3. Floor insulation, duct sealing, condensing tankless water heaters, and smart thermostats all above 10K, and then it just kind of decrements from there. But yeah, kind of interesting just to kind of keep tabs on, do we have overperforming versus underperforming measures? And so total 19 measure types have saved at least 1 therm. So don't want to lose the exterior entry door, 32 therms hanging in there. So take a moment, please review this. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
All right, I think we have the last slide here, Jesse.
Yeah, one more follow-up slide. So this is just confirming some critical dates that we identified in the last CAG meeting. So just want to confirm that the biennial report for 2024 and 2025 was delivered to the CAG group on May 12th of this year, and the report was filed with the Washington Utility and Transportation Commission on June 11th. So yeah, we identified our dates and we met them. So I just want to confirm that it was delivered and filed as expected.
Are there any questions or conversation topics on the residential program we'd like to have? All right, we'll move on to the next section here, which are low-income weatherization. And I believe Srishti is going to be leading this section.
Yes.
Srishti, if you're, yeah. All right, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Caleb. Hi, everyone. I'm Srishti. And the total projects completed was 32. And the number of measures completed were 126. The project coordination fee was coming up to $207,000. And the indirect rate was $69,000. The total therms saved was 6,357, and the average cost per project was coming up to $30,000. The lowest project was costing us around $1,680, and the highest project amounted to approximately $97,000. And the average number of measures per project was 3,994. And the average number of therms per project was 198. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
If I recall speaking with Noemi, some of the highlights of this being $97,000 at the top end of the project, we're seeing, I understand, a trend over the past few years of projects increasing in size, increasing in dollar amounts. So seeing those really high dollar items, likely a pretty drastic improvement in that home or the quality of life for the customer. And then the average therms per project, 198. I believe that's something like 10 or 20% higher than we've seen on average the past couple of years. So we're just seeing, call it the scale of projects. They seem to be increasing slightly over time.
Mm-hmm. The project cost was high due to a large number and volume of measures that were installed. So the overall project costed us around $60,000, but however, the project coordination fee and admin charges up to 40%. So the cost went up to $97,000.
Yeah, thank you.
So these are the participation broken down into agencies. So for Community Action Center, the estimated homes were 10, and they did 4. Estimated cost per home was $10,000. And for Coastal Community Action Program, the estimated homes were 30, the actuals were 10, and the estimated cost per home was $33,000. And you can review the numbers if you have any questions. For Opportunity Council, the total estimated homes were 18, and the actuals were 6. And the estimated cost per home was around $13,000. So the current year estimation is $2,375,000. Until now, it's like we have spent $968,000. Okay, so these are the pilot program results. So since March till June, the projects completed are 2. Number of measures completed were 15. The total cost was $37,000. Term saved was 621, and the average cost per project was $18,000. So the lowest project was $17,000, and the higher one was $20,000. Average number of measures per project was 7.5, and the terms per project was 204. And we have 4 projects in the queue. Okay, so this slide highlights the salient points surrounding the community scaled weatherization program. Our team is currently attending workshops to understand the overall remit of this program. However, based on our meetings thus far, all notes have been summarized on the slide for your reference. So if anyone has any questions, you can directly send this to us and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rishni. Let's give it a second here to see if any questions or comments pop up.
Mhm.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next topic, we've got a regulatory update with, I see Jody popping on here. I'll kick it over to you, Jody. We have, I believe, 2 highlights here looking at our EM&V progress as well as plans going forward, and then our conservation potential assessment, which we've already talked about a bit this morning. Jody?
Thanks, Caleb. Jody Albert here. I'm an energy efficiency analyst for Cascade as well. So just a quick update on our EM&V. We are currently working on our low income evaluation, measurement, and verification. And our initial results do show that Cascade is effectively targeting its low income customers in both Washington and Oregon, which is great news. We're really happy with what we're seeing so far. A draft of this study will be sent to the CAG in approximately August. Then this will have a 30-day review period before filing as required. And if there are any questions, please let me know. If not, we can move to the next slide where we go over our, yes, Shaylee.
Good morning, all. Yeah, question on the report. So you're going to send it to the CAG. Is the team planning to set a meeting and present results to the agency partners as well? If not, can that be arranged?
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, sorry. Sorry, it went back in my headphones. Yeah, I can discuss with Noemi, and I have no issue with that being presented in our low income advisory group as well. I think that would be really beneficial for that group to see a full presentation on it as well.
Yeah, well, that'd be great. Although most of the low income advisory group, I'm on that committee too. They are a little more focused on the energy assistance side, and the weatherization providers don't often attend that meeting, or some have a lot of crossover, but a lot of them don't have any crossover. So I think like specifically an agency like provider meeting would be good. But again, I can send this to Noemi if that would be more appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Noemi would definitely be the contact to set something like that up.
Cool. Well, I'm interested to see the results. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent input, Shaylee. Appreciate it. One thing to note, of course, in this slide, we mentioned both Washington and Oregon. The report is structured to have called separate sections. We know we have some regulatory requirements for each state individually, so that's just a clarifying point here. But like we mentioned, results seem very positive, both on call it the targeting and the report, as well as the billing analysis there, which Jody and Srishti have been leading the way on that project. Shaylee, yes, please do. We highly encourage reaching out to Noemi, and we can show results and help tailor the report and tailor the results of what we do with the information. All right, next slide.
And so as Caleb mentioned earlier, we do plan to begin contracting for our next 4-year EM&V cycle. We do intend to continue working with the same company, Qualis, who previously we referred to as ADM. And what that looks like is very similar to our previous schedule of how we did EM&V, where our first year we review our commercial industrial program. And so that's where we would go over like those greenhouse heat curtains. 2028, we would follow with a residential equipment impact and program process evaluation. 2029, a residential envelope study, and then 2030, another low income study as well. If there's any feedback or questions or suggestions on this, you can ask us now, or you can always send me an email following this meeting as well.
Many of those in the call probably recall we first had this conversation, I believe, 4 years ago with a new requirement in our, I think it was a 2022 Land Conservation Plan to conduct third-party independent EM&V. This 4-year schedule was proposed and slated. Kind of just, this sounds like a good plan, let's do this. It ended up working out very well for us. We are now in the process of completing the 4th of the 4-year evaluations, each of them filed on an annual basis. In summary, the reports or the results from each of those 4 years were, I would say, strong, positive. We did what we claimed, I guess would be a really good way to put it into one sentence, which makes us really happy. We spend a lot of time, effort, energy, including on those with this call, to do what we do so that I actually see that the math works out and the customer experience works out, both empirically and anecdotally. There's a really positive feeling that's associated with that. So this is one of those times where we do get to have some experts come in, run some billing analysis, run some non-billing analysis through other methods to help us determine what to do in the future as well with this information, which Jody will be leading the way on. Go ahead, Louisa.
Hi, what does EM and V stand for?
I apologize. Evaluation, measurement, and verification. There's different ways to go about it. I've mentioned a couple of those. Evaluation, measurement, verification. One of perhaps the most prolific ways or the most calculated ways is through billing analysis, where at a high level, we see all the customers who have participated in the program. We see what their gas usage was from between 12 and 13 months prior to doing the thing, which is typically installing a high efficient measure, and then 12 or 13 months, depending on the billing cycle, after it was installed. And we calculate what the gas usage difference was, which hopefully was decreased by approximately what we claimed it to be. There's also ways to compare it towards industry standards or industry calculations, like through the Northwest Power Conservation Council, if billing analysis isn't available. And then there's some other methods as well that are conducted there.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. In the evaluation piece, you can also think about surveying, contacting customers, having third parties going through our website to see if the navigation makes sense, if it's clear and accessible for our customers of different, call it native languages, different backgrounds, and their reading ability, whatever it may be. That's all a piece of this. And we actually made quite a few website updates about a year ago at this time from results of the last program process evaluation. Great question. I should have started with that. And Jody, I think the action item for us after this slide, pending any other comments or feedback for us, we'd likely kindle a conversation with Qualys, same company we've been working with for the past 4 years, to discuss renewing or starting a new contract for the next 4-year cycle. So we'll likely start that here pretty soon. So if there's any feedback or comments for us, we'd love to hear them in short order so we can make that happen, start the project all over again. Okay, next topic.
Our last timeline update is on our CPA, our 2027 Conservation Potential Assessment. And this will get started this year. And so this is where we will establish our 10-year and 2-year conservation potential targets for the program, pursuant to the BCP conditions document from the most recent BCP. So Cascade and AEG Applied Energy Group, we are currently contracting for this 2027, and we plan to begin working in August of this year, with a draft being shared to the CAG by April 21st, and then filed in a new docket 30 days later. This is aligning with the new BCP conditions requirement of either filing by the date listed or with the IRP filing, whichever comes first. And so we are aligning with our future IRP filing for next year.
I also caught a typo I have on this screen. We should have mentioned Cascade and ICF, formerly Applied Energy Group. If there's any confusion on the call here, I see Ken's got the background logo in the back, and that spurred the memory there.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb. I was gonna make that note as well.
Same team, same excellent folks that we have on the call here. So I think we're in excellent hands. Different name, different spot where the checks are cut.
If there's no questions on this, I will actually be handing it off to Ken with ICF, and he will be giving just a nice overview as to what this 2027 Conservation Potential Assessment will look like.
Yeah. Thank you, Joey. This is fantastic updates for us here. So we've got an action item to start our contracting or our planning for our EM&V evaluations. And then we'll kick it over to Ken Walter. And once again, the whole point of this upcoming conversation with Ken is our contracting phase is still in place. We're getting very close to completing that. So our work has not yet started on this project. This is the time for everyone on the call to help us scope it, help us get ideas, gather information. What should we focus on? What should we focus less on? This is the time to do that. So please, this is a great time to share your thoughts or share any questions you may have to help us. Okay?
All right, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. It's always fun to come to these things, to come hear what people are thinking on these. So yeah, this is going to be mostly fairly high level. We'll touch some points just on what we do in the conservation potential assessment in general. Also, we'll have a couple of notes on things that we're doing a little bit differently or thinking about differently this time around. We can just go ahead right on to the next slide. Thank you. So first off, just the purpose of the CPA itself. Obviously, its primary importance is to inform Cascade's goals and planning. That is not just the regulatory filing itself, but also Cascade's own integrated resource plan and the target setting for the program portfolios, which are the numbers we've been discussing all the way up to this point. So very, very relevant conversation to be in. As we conduct the study, one of the most important things is to be consistent with other regional studies. In the area, of course, the biggest ones are done by the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, although as we have been partnering with Cascade and with other gas utilities in the region, there is recognition that there are some differences between electric studies, just the way those measures work, the way those programs are administered sometimes. So we always try and keep cognizant of the fact that this is a gas utility, and sometimes there are modifications to whether it's adoption rates or something else that need to be looked at. But still maintaining that overall consistency with the methodology from the NWPCC. Another big one is, of course, it's already part of the commission orders, but at ICF, we are very committed to transparency while performing these studies. Cascade's a great partner in that. We document everything that we do, all the decisions, the measure lists. There are a number of collaborative phases and things that we share with Cascade and that can be circulated. just to make sure that everyone is aware of what we are doing, how we're thinking about it, and that things are really well documented at the end as well. So there's really just lots of clarity on any assumptions and where all of our inputs came from on these studies. So it's fun to be doing another one of these. This is, I think, our 6th engagement with Cascade at this point. It's 5th or 6th. Yeah, it's learn something new every time and try and find a new and better way to look at something every time. So fun to get started on another one. You can go to the next slide. So this is the 10,000-foot view overview of the process for one of these conservation potential assessments. Starting on the far left side with the units in blue, the very first thing that we start talking about is measure list development while we're putting out a data request to Cascade and asking for all of their latest updates to their load and knowledge about their customers. We're also engaged in discussing what is the measure list for the study going to be. We like that to be as comprehensive as possible. We look at obviously the past CPAs, what Cascade's current programs or offerings. But then we will expand a little bit too, and we'll look at TRMs, maybe even from other parts of the country. We'll look at Energy Star documents, DOE, RTF. Basically, anybody who has done enough of research into a measure to give it costs and savings assessments, we at least want to be aware of it and then evaluate whether it makes sense to go into Cascade study, whether it's regionally appropriate, or if there's a way that we can adjust for weather, anything like that. So we have a good conversation about that as we develop it, and that becomes a piece of documentation. Then we will move into market characterization and measure characterization. And the difference between those two is that market characterization is about how people are using energy right now. As of the latest data available, we'll get the most recent calendar year of consumption. And one of the most important pieces of that is getting all the way down to real use per customer, calibrating our base analysis in that and making sure that all the savings that we then derive from it are relative to that use. There's a big difference between doing that and just using, maybe it's an algorithmic savings assessment that may not be appropriate relative to actual customer consumption. So we always make sure that we're putting it into ground truth like that. Once we have our market characterized and we have all of the cost, savings, lifetime assumptions that we're going to use for the measures, then that all goes into first our baseline projection. This is where we take our market characterization, project it into the future, and start accounting for changes that we know are going to happen outside of the universe of energy efficiency. So what's going on with our, not outside, but that aren't part of programs. So codes and standards, customer growth or declines that may occur, if there are other elements that Cascade uses for their forecasts, such as future weather assumptions, we want to make sure that all of that is incorporated so that we have this projection of how energy is going to be used, how gas is going to be used by customers in the absence of a program. So it's the counterfactual that serves as the ground reality, and then you measure savings against that, which is where we get to potential estimates. Consistent with past CBAs for Cascade and with the Northwest region in general, we will be developing technical potential, achievable technical potential, and then achievable economic, which we'll do under 2 different tests. I have a little bit later slide that gets into more of the details on those. We also have the capacity to do sensitivity analyses after the base model is configured. You can start making small adjustments and then comparing your 2 data sets to understand how that impacted things. And all of that can be packed up and fed by Cascade into their IRP whenever they're ready. I have a couple more explainer slides on these pieces, but I'm happy to field any questions if people have them at this particular phase. All right, not seeing a hand. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide.
Yeah, Ken, you did a really nice job of mentioning during the baseline section where it's accounting for applicable codes and standards. It's the idea of what is currently known, not what could potentially come up a few years from now. Whereas that's a scenario that we'd run. In our baseline projection, our ground truth, that's where it's these codes and standards are in place, they're approved, very likely to happen. That's a question we get pretty frequently that Ken's team does a great job of explaining.
So I'm not going to read everything on here. It is a bit of an eye chart, but I did want to bring this slide up just to talk a little bit more about how we put together that universe of measures that we evaluate in the study. So this is the process that my lead engineer goes through and works with us and with the Cascade team to go through. You can see on the far left is all the resources that we might pull a measure from. Then during the measure screening phase is where we can identify maybe these measures are not appropriate to include. Either there are specific sectors or segments they don't apply to, so we want to make sure those are correctly limited. There may be things that were previously energy efficiency measures that have now been absorbed by codes and standards, or the markets are fully transformed, and we want to account for that before we're going to try and project new savings for them inappropriately. Then we'll go through the characterization process. In that third box, the top box there, I do want to point out the measure source hierarchy. This is another important step that we go through. We get approval from Cascade on it. This is a piece of documentation that'll be included in reports. For any given efficiency measure, there's usually more than one source that you could use for costs or savings. We make sure that it's going to be the most appropriate data for Cascade. So for example, Cascade's own evaluations on their measures is going to be our biggest ground truth for unit savings. If something hasn't been evaluated through their programs, then we look for a source that's close by. Are there other Washington evaluations? Is it in RTF? Is it in Power Council? And only if we've exhausted those would we then move out to something like, maybe there's an Illinois TRM measure that just looks too interesting not to include. That requires more work. We have to adjust it to Cascade's climate and make those kinds of appropriate changes. So at all times, we're trying to draw the circle as small as possible and make sure that measure data we're using is as appropriate to Cascade's data as possible. And then we'll move outside of that if we absolutely have to, and it's just too interesting not to include. And then as far as the data integration, this is when everything comes together into the full efficiency potential, IRP inputs, and then later scenario analysis once we start modifying some things. So it's quite a process. It's a thrilling process. Or at least I think so, or I wouldn't have been doing it for 15 years. Looks like we have a hand up.
This is Wesley with the commission. Thanks for this overview. Quick follow-up question on the source hierarchy. I guess the simple question is if you pull from other evaluations that other utilities in Washington use. Obviously, Avista, PSC, they're not Cascade, but the region is more or less more similar than some potentially regional studies. So yeah, just wondering if you rely on those, and if so, how much of a reliance do you give?
If they're publicly available and seem to make sense, we will use them. We don't go ferreting in where people haven't provided that information. Usually, though, a lot of that ends up, because there's so much dialogue within the region, a lot of that information gets circulated or trickled down into like RTF workbooks eventually as well. So I would say other utilities documents are more of a, well, we can't really find anything else on this, but they did a good evaluation on it. Or somebody did a crazy evaluation and people are discussing those results and whether or not they're appropriate to use or if there was a stunning result. So that's more case by case. It's probably not one of our primary sources. We'll focus mostly on Cascade and regional work and then state level TRMs, unless something is really prominent from another utility.
So it sounds like you'll just refer to those evaluations to fill in any potential gaps that you might have.
If there's a gap and it's something that people have really come up, like for example, if there's conversation in the region, as if Cascade is talking to other utilities in the region and somebody's like, well, we think the RTF number is really weird because this is what our evaluation got. That becomes the point at which we would look into those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, it's helpful. I guess one example that's up top of my mind is home energy reports. I'm not sure if that was included in Cascade's last CPA, but regardless, that's something that's very robust in PSC's service territory, and they've done quite a few evaluations on it to date. So could be interesting to look at those, and those are all public as well.
Exactly. If it's publicly available, then I'm sure my measure characterization team will be keeping an eye on that because, yeah, especially a volatile measure like that, there's a swimming sea of assumptions around those, but a lot of them are very round numbers. It's always interesting to see what people get in real world practice. Thank you.
Yeah, great input, Wesley. And that was a measure that was evaluated in our most recent CPA, I believe, with a measure year life of 1 was the assumption at that point. Some other items that we're currently hoping to evaluate and perhaps even include in our future portfolio would be things like dual fuel measures or natural gas units as a backup measure. These sort of things that we're hoping to evaluate, learn more about if nothing else, because they're coming on market and they're becoming more prolific. For example, the one I just mentioned being in Bend, where we had our previous pilot, now part of our weatherization program in Oregon, with our furnaces as a backup to electric space, or I should say electric heat pumps. Perhaps that's something we can incorporate into Washington in the future. It's a great piece. It's great to have the experts in hand with ICF to help us with that. Should we move on, Ken?
Yep, I think we can go on to the next one. Again, this one's a bit of an eye chart, but we do have a lot of data sources, and I wanted to kind of bring in a good documentation on that. You'll see some things that are highlighted. These are some specific things that we know we're going to be new information, updated information in this round of the CPA. Obviously, starting on the left with Cascades information, which updates every time. It's always the most accessible resource and the most important ground truth to align with. And then survey data, the local regional surveys like NIAS, RBSA, CBSA, there haven't been updates on those since the last CPA. So that'll just going to be mostly a QC check for us. But obviously, once we compare it to what's going on with actual customer use, that's where we find out if we need to make any adjustments to our current characterizations for individual customer segments. On the technical data side, we know that there's been some updates. There's the newest power plan, 9th power plan. ICF did work on advising some of that. And then we've also incorporated the updates in the other sector workbooks. We're also using a new simulation system. This is the National Laboratory of the Rockies Build Stock simulations. As now that we are fully integrated with ICF, they are doing a lot of work with those prototypes and sim models. It's an update to the DOE simulation tool that we used to use and a really important component in our simulated measures like for weatherization and HVAC load, especially the ability to use the stock model, which is actually very geographic. We can get all the way into specific areas of Cascades territory and get sampled analysis and direct prototypes for those individual regions. So that's an enhancement I'm really looking forward to as we develop the new customer profiles this time around. Under energy codes and standards, we are still under the effects of the 2021 Washington State Energy Code, updated edition that took effect in 2024. We have all federal energy standards characterized in the equipment that we expect to be on the books. So far, they are not adding new ones, but they have not removed currently ones in place. So we're keeping an eye on those. Most importantly, though, as Caleb mentioned earlier, we do not predict future energy or building codes that have not been codified and put into place yet. So the reference baseline will be codes that are currently in place. And then market trends and effects we always look at every year. Hard to say exactly what will be updated until we get deep into it, but we always want to look at what RTF is assuming as far as any market baselines that are out there. We also use purchase trends from Energy Star sales data and the EIA's National Annual Energy Outlook, which is disaggregated down to the state level for all fuels that they cover on the residential side, and then on just sort of the regional level on the CNI side. So we'll be looking at all of that and making sure we have the most recent inputs. I think we can go to the next slide. This is just another example of market characterization. These are just showing some small exhibits that came out of the previous study report as far as overall sector balance and end uses for Cascades natural gas load in 2023. So obviously we will be updating that. Just a good comment on the sectors that we're classing. You can see industrial is a very small wedge there. I do want to be clear that we have historically not included industrial transport only customers in the CPA. And that is the plan this time as well. Commercial and industrial are further segmented by primary business activity, so restaurants, offices, food manufacturing versus agriculture. Important to get the end uses specific to those individual buildings accurate. Changes the economics of an individual measure in the building. So very important to understand what they're actually doing with their natural gas in these locations. And in the past, residential customers have just been segmented by housing type and income level, aside from geography, because Cascade has separated climate zones. We will be consulting with the equity working group this time around to evaluate equity factors and see if there are different thoughts on that approach. All right. Oh, and looks like Wesley has his hand up.
Yeah, that all sounds good. Sounds like great improvements and iterations this time around. A follow-up on the equity and income components. I guess in the past, when Cascade looked at income and its CPA, I guess how granular was that data? I know I've worked more closely with PSC's CPA, so I don't know as much about other companies, but was there a level of granularity like high, medium, low income levels, or I guess what shape did that take, and what are the thoughts going into this CPA? And obviously, it sounds like the conversations around other equity is forthcoming, but if you have any preliminary thoughts or ideas about that, that would be interesting to know.
I can speak to previous studies income segmentation, which did have both moderate and low income groups. So low would be like the LIHEAP qualified, and then moderate was around median income. And then everybody above that was a separate group. As far as equity, though, I would defer to Caleb on that.
Yeah, that's a fair deferral. And Wesley hit the nail on the head. I see this being an upcoming conversation with the Equity Advisory Group. In my conversations with Noemi, we're looking at sometime, hopefully in the fall, to have this conversation. One of the ideas that we've been kicking around internally is having it be a programmatic piece, perhaps doing it even as a geographic location. If a customer is in a certain area or zip code, for example, we can offer an additional bonus or incentive to those customers. There's other alternative options that could go in there that we're kicking around, but nothing confirmed, just some ideas of what can we do, what can the model help us with, but then also what can we do secondarily on the program development side. Shaylee?
Yeah, just sort of building off of this topic, I wonder if the modeling can incorporate energy burden, which obviously has an element of income built into it, but it might be interesting to see. I don't know. I don't know the details of how the modeling works, but it might be interesting to see what types of opportunities seem to be especially available for high energy burdened customers, and where those customers are, like overlaying with geography.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much we've really looked at energy burden specifically before. When we're talking about modeling within the CPA, as far as what actually affects the model, one of the things that we're reliant on are actual differences in the energy characteristics, changes in presence of equipment or things like that that might be difficult to cross over with that. But like Caleb said, there's nothing stopping, program or other, even if it's not a modeled difference, we can still probably help quantify those customers, and then Cascade can think internally about ways of reaching them as well.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a pretty strong correlation between folks who are highly burdened and who need pretty significant efficiency upgrades or equipment upgrades, right? It might just more be like a targeting element than a modeling element, but to the extent that there's opportunities to overlay those, that I would be interested to see if those are possibilities.
Yeah, Excellent input. Thank you, Shailene. One of the benefits that we have working with ICF, both this past iteration and the future iteration, pending our finalization of the contract, is engaging ICF to help us with our program planning phase, which follows a few months after our conservation potential assessment is completed, having the experts that are using the model, pulling data directly from that to help us inform program choices rather than modeling choices. There's a lot of power there. So thank you for that, Shailene. Also, Wesley, I just want to confirm if there's any follow-ups or any further things we'd like to look at with our this slide here.
No other thoughts right now from me, but I did want to say that I think I and staff are super appreciative of Cascade looking into this. That's really awesome that you're doing a deep dive into this in your models. So good job and thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. All right, we've got just maybe 1 or 2 slides left here for Ken.
Yeah. All right. Baseline projection, as I mentioned, this is where we take our market characterization, move it forward, account for things like codes and standards. So the biggest thing that we'll be doing is updating to the same assumptions that are in Cascade's latest iteration of the IRP. Now, in the previous study, that update to the new IRP included reduced future heating degree days, which lowers consumption, and also a static customer forecast, no increase in customers for residential and commercial. So that caused some reductions in available savings opportunities compared to prior CPAs, because if you don't have people coming on the system, there's no new gas load to defer. So it'll be interesting to see if that assumption still holds true. And it's also worth noting, and we talked about Washington State Energy Code and things like that. Building codes, sort of by their nature, don't tend to be very backwards looking. They don't have a very large impact on existing customers. Sometimes sufficient remodeling can still hit them, but that's a much slower process. So it will mean, if this assumption still holds true or something similar to it, expect that the CPA is going to be very focused on existing gas loads and probably not a whole lot of impact from future building codes or new construction. All right. And then just a little bit about our levels of potential that we're going to be calculating. I mentioned these earlier. So just to go a little bit more into detail about what those terms actually mean. So technical potential is a theoretical maximum of efficiency. It means everyone does everything no matter what it costs. The most efficient equipment goes in at time of replacement. Everyone gets weatherized with the best possible stuff on the market. And participation is 100%. So obviously it represents a very theoretical maximum. It's not not anything we expect to get to, but it does provide a lower boundary for really how low gas could conceivably go, given the technologies that are currently available. Achievable technical potential adjusts for that by applying the ramp rates under the Power Council methodology. So our technical potential is 100% adoption. Achievable technical is what accounts for market barriers in the actual process of getting people where they are, whether that's a retrofit curve over time or just the lost opportunity development year over year as people need to replace equipment. So it represents sort of a realistic schedule for adoption, but still usually a higher level of it, especially because nothing has to pass a cost effectiveness test yet. And then finally, we get down to achievable economic, which is still scheduled across the ramp rates, just like the achievable technical, but this time we are applying the cost screen. For Cascade's work, we do look at it from 2 different perspectives. On the UCT test, utility cost test, we only look at the costs and benefits from the utility side. So crucially, that doesn't include things like non-energy benefits, whether that's water savings from a shower head or something like that. And then on the TRC side, we look at the full universe of the costs and the monetized benefits, which does include those customer non-energy impacts. So the UCT side tends to have lower costs because it only has to consider the incentive, not the full cost of the measure. The TRC side tends to have slightly higher benefits because it does get to include those NEIs. Historically, the UCT test has consistently shown more potential for Cascade. Go ahead and say that. I would expect that to continue, but we'll see what happens this time. All right. And then there's one more. a sensitivity that we're already planning to address. This is in response to commission orders, and that is the state emissions goal. So there will be an additional scenario that we'll develop after we've done those 3 levels of potential, and we've discussed them with Cascade, and feel like those are in a reasonable spot. Then we make one change, as we do for these scenarios, and in this case, it's going to be an avoided cost scenario that is based on the avoided costs that are based on reaching the state emissions targets, whatever that impact that has on Cascade's avoided costs. So we'll rerun the model with the new avoided costs and see how that affects the achievable economic potential after that.
I know that's a piece we'll be working hand in hand with Brian Robertson's team with the IRP staff, but I'm sure Wesley, if there's other folks from the UTC or other market actors that we should help with that scenario, we're definitely welcome to. I think this will be the first time we've run this specific scenario, although it's similar to other ones we've done in the past with modifying avoided costs. All right, then we just got our. Oh, go ahead, Wesley.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that sounds good. I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head, but I expect that this will also be presented, or maybe it was presented at the recent IRP group, but I imagine this will be an ongoing discussion, and so more opportunities to get feedback. But otherwise, yeah, to see this, I think will provide some really interesting information.
Yeah, a great call out as well. I believe everyone on this call received, as a part of our requirements regulatory-wise as well, we shared the full IRP schedule and opportunities to join any upcoming meetings or working groups. If you didn't receive those and you'd like to, you can reach out to myself directly or Brian Robertson on the call to get involved. That's a big process that team works through, and just kudos to them. There's a lot that goes on with the IRP. Yeah, I think next slide here is just the schedule.
Yep. So as Jody and Caleb mentioned when they teed it off, we are still in the contracting preliminary phase, hoping to kick off shortly, really start putting feet to ground in August. Market characterization targeting for September, October. Measure list itself to be final by the end of September, and then all measures characterized hopefully before the Thanksgiving holiday. Get all of our baselines done by end of year. All of these are points that we have a lot of collaboration with Cascade, a lot of combined review and documentation steps. So that's why it does take a little while, but it's good to have a lot of these conversations and make sure all the foundations are built. Then we'll be looking for draft potential is targeted in the first quarter of 2027, draft report in April, and then the final report in time to be filed with the IRP.
I would anticipate Ken's team joining us likely for almost certainly for our Q1 and Q2 advisory group meetings next year, and also perhaps for the last one of this year, depending on where we're at with the progress. So we'll keep this group informed, and we can also send out any ad hoc emails or updates, questions, decisions, that sort of thing to the group. This is a big project, which is literally in excess of 1,000 man hours. So it's great to get it started here early and get everyone's involvement to make it as prolific and beneficial to us as possible. I think the last slide has Ken's information if anyone needs it as well. Oh, yeah, Wesley.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I got to jump in with another question before you say bye, Ken. This refers back to the achievable potential assumptions. It really is just a broad question early on, but as we know, or as we know from the prior bienniums, there's been some, or I guess the reliance on larger commercial and industrial customers can really have the potential to make or break a target, which is, not an ideal situation. And I guess just the question is like based on, seeing the fluctuations in those larger projects, does that call into question the achievability rates of those projects? And is that a consideration or something that you plan on looking at going into this CPA?
We will certainly be having an eye on it, and we have had good success, especially in the last cycle, but in the last couple cycles, we've had the opportunity to sit down with the folks from TRC and really kind of get some of the horizon on those projects to try and do our best to approach the achievability of them in a realistic way. That said, when we're on these 20-year time horizons under council methodology, year to year may be a little interesting, but the 20-year horizon tends to be pretty stable, just because, again, the council's methodology is to look at all potential is achievable over 20 years, although the schedule may shift. So we'll have to work with Cascade and discuss with TRC how the modeling might reflect that variability. But it's interesting. But like I said, the total amount of savings that exist, which is kind of what council's methodology is concerned with, are likely to stay close to the same. The question's really going to be schedule. So yeah, we'll have to discuss with them how best to approach the achievable ramp rates in those respects.
Yeah, that's super. Yeah, it's very helpful and a clear distinction. So I appreciate that. I guess it comes down to the dual purposes of this being an IRP input, but also being the the baseline of 2-year targets. And so yeah. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it tends to be iterative. Once we have that near draft potential in Q1, that's when we really start looking at, how does this compare to past programs? Is it, is the goal dependent on a wide mix of measures, or is it just coming in from a couple of, high profile things? That's what makes it more risky. It's also worth pointing out that, generally speaking, Cascade's target is really a big pool. And how they reach that pool may not exactly match the way the CPA designed it, because they may get more of one project, less of another. Over time, it'll trickle out. So the CPA should not be seen as a straitjacket either, but we do our best to reflect conditions on the ground. That's for sure.
Yeah. Excellent question and response. Wesley, you bring up an excellent point that the CPA, I think of as 3 different horizons for us. The 2-year horizon, which we focus on pretty common as it's the shortest time horizon. The 10-year horizon, which we're also required to complete on the conservation plan regulatory requirements. But also for Ryan's team, we go out through 2050 for some of these measures. So it's called a 3-in-1 job, where we focus on different pieces for different reasons. And this group typically focuses on the shortest time horizon, although it's only one of those parts. Great comment. I think that concludes Ken's section. Is there actually the whole meeting as well? Is there any questions for Ken or any other topics we'd like to discuss in the call here? All right, give it just a bit of space, but on the screen here, you can see the upcoming meeting is at 9 a.m. on October 14th. As always, I welcome any feedback or topics for us to discuss at that Q4 meeting. It'll be the last one of the year. You can reach me at caleb.reimer@cngc.com. All right. With that, we'll close the meeting and say thanks everyone for spending about an hour and 15 minutes or so with us on the call this morning. We'll have these recordings and minutes posted on the website here shortly. Other than that, just say thank you. Enjoy the rest of your morning or afternoon, wherever you're at.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Caleb.
Bye.
Thanks, Caleb.